Welcome back to another episode of From the Truck. So it's a beautiful day out, and I had really intended to do this from the backyard. I have a table set up and a chair, and it's nice. It was sunny, and I had a nice glass of water, and I was going to sit out in the backyard. But my neighbor has decided to take advantage of the beautiful day, and he's running his leaf blower. So I didn't think I could compete with the sound of the leaf blower. So I'm in the car or in the truck, whatever you want to call it, in the driveway. So maybe this should be called From the Driveway. But so if you're like me, my wife Nikki and I, we're holed up. We're taking, we're in the house. We're going out in crowds sparingly. We try to get out and walk every day. And last night we went to a local restaurant for takeout here to try to help support our local businesses during this time of shutdown. I would encourage you to do that. By the way, most restaurants are doing takeout. You can call them and see what their menu is, or maybe they have a Facebook page or something. But so we went to one of our favorite local restaurants last night and got some takeout. But so we're taking these extra precautions mainly because of the virus, but we're taking extra precautions because, as you know, we're expecting. Our baby is due here in less than a month, and so we're really trying to be cautious with who we come into contact with, who I come into contact with, who she comes into contact with, and all of this. Last night the Senate passed the $2 trillion. I know that's a number that's hard to wrap our heads around, but the $2 trillion stimulus bill, whatever they're calling it, and they passed it. And I posted some things that, irked some people, and of course they said I was making it political, but things are being held up for very odd reasons. And I understand it's a tremendous amount of money and we need to get people back to work as soon as possible, but we also need to get this virus over with. I watched a news conference the other day with the governor of New York, who's doing a fantastic job and has really come to the forefront in leadership and all of this. And with the crackdown that they've done, they've actually seen the hospital stays go down. The number of people reporting has gone down. So it's working. The stay-at-home, shelter-in-place, whatever you want to call it, is working. We just need to keep it up. And I know there's this desire to get things back, and we certainly do not want to run into a Great Depression. But we also don't want to sacrifice lives. I know there was some talk about, senior citizens and grandparents would be willing to sacrifice their life for the economy, and that's just wrong. That's wrong thinking. No one should be sacrificing their life for the Dow Jones Industrial Average or your stock portfolio or whatever. A corporation is not going to sacrifice themselves for you. So we shouldn't be talking about sacrificing lives. But I've been thinking a lot about sort of the unintended consequences of all of this and the things that maybe we don't think about. And so in all the political rhetoric and all the partisan rankering, whatever we want to call it, that goes on, behind all of those numbers, behind the extra $600 in unemployment benefits that, are part of this package, are actual real people. It was released today that an unprecedented number of people have filed for unemployment. 3.3 million American citizens, people that you and I know, have filed for unemployment as a consequence of what's happening. And I think what's happening is necessary, again, to slow this down, but those are real people. That's 3.3 million people, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, grandparents, aunts and uncles, flesh and blood, actual people behind all those numbers. And I think it's easy for us just to kind of look at that and look at it in the abstract, because I think maybe sometimes that's how we have to think about it so we can wrap our head around this. But 3.3 million people, that's the people who filed, right? Now, if you own a barbershop or a nail salon, or maybe you're a tradesman, a plumber or a carpenter, and you work for yourself, you don't get to file for unemployment yet. That's part of this package, what they call the gig economy, right? So musicians, actors, all of these folks who are considered self-employed they don't get to file for unemployment. If the plumbing shop has to shut down, they just don't get paid, right? There's no safety net for them until this bill fills in that gap, thankfully. And I believe it will pass. I believe everybody just has to sort of rattle cages for a bit and get their 15 minutes of fame on the microphone, and there'll be op-eds written and all these other things, and eventually everything will get signed, and and then we'll work on the next thing. But I think we have to remember that there's people behind the numbers, right? I've seen clergy who are still saying this is no big deal. It's no worse than the seasonal flu. Well, percentage-wise, maybe that's true. But today's March 26th, and before I pressed record, a story came out that we've reached 1,000 deaths. Now, to you who think that it's not as bad as the seasonal flu, that's easy to say unless one of those 1,000 is your grandmother or your brother or your parent, right? Again, just like the 3.3 million, these 1,000 are actual human beings. Someone loved them, they loved others, and they're flesh and blood, and we have to remember that. I think the faces of those 1,000 people should be shown on every newscast, and everyone who dies because of this, their picture should be shown to remind us what's going on. Now, also last night there was a picture, I posted it on my Facebook page. It came out of Italy. It was a priest in a church, and there were, I believe it was 65 coffins. In Italy, they're using churches to store coffins with the dead before they can be transported somewhere. And so he was standing there blessing them, and the caption that I wrote was, for those of you clergy who think this isn't a big deal and are still holding in-person worship, and yes, there are still clergy holding in-person worship, even though the law has said, no, you can't do this. But the caption I wrote was, if you want to keep holding in-person worship, eventually this is what you're going to see. Now, I know that may sound alarmist and all of that, and maybe it's time to ring the alarm so people will start taking this serious. But this is very serious. So let's go back to the no worse than the seasonal flu analogy for a minute. And maybe it's not, but the one difference is, for those 1,000 deaths that we've had so far, only 10 people can come to those funerals. Only 10. At the beginning of December, my father died. And so, as is the custom here, we had a wake and we had a funeral. We had a wake, and my brothers and sister-in-laws were there, and my nieces and nephew, we were lined up. You've been to a wake, and all the parade of people come through, and relatives and friends, and friends of my dad and friends of my mother, and and we got to grieve in this way with the people that we know. And then we had the funeral the next day, and there were all these people that were there with us and helped us, and then we had a meal afterwards, which continued the healing process. Or I should say started the healing process, didn't continue. But for these 1,000 families, they're not going to have that opportunity. There was an article this morning in the New York Times called "The Long Goodbye, Funerals Are Another Thing That Now Must Wait." And I'll put a link down below the video. This is an unintended consequence of this. Sure, we talk about baseball games being canceled, the Olympics has been moved, the Dow Jones is up and down. We talk about local shops being closed, and we want to get things back open by Easter, and we want to send the right message, and we want to do this and we want to do that, and airlines and cruise ships. These are 1,000 people, 1,000 families who will not be allowed the same funeral that I was able to give my father. So contagious is this virus that we can't even have funerals. That's the difference between this and the seasonal flu. So for those of you who keep touting this, it's no worse than the seasonal flu. The seasonal flu is worse. More people die of the seasonal flu every year. I want you to think of these 1,000 families next time you're going to say that, post it, tweet it, write it, Instagram it, video it, whatever it is you're going to do, you need to stop. Because it's just not true. Think about these 1,000 families and the images and the lasting image, their last moment. Some of them, probably all 1,000 of them, could not even be with their loved one as they drew their last breath. I want you to think about that. And the number's going to go up. The number will go higher. The prediction is we're on course, the same course that Italy is on. Maybe it won't be as bad. Maybe it will. I don't know. No one can predict. But we need to stop with the false equivalency to the seasonal flu because it's not the same. So we have to pick up the pieces. We have to go on. We have to work together. We have to do all these things that we keep saying. And it's true. I believe it. But it starts with this idea of empathy and compassion for those that are suffering through this. Maybe it's not affecting you or your family. Perhaps you're a bit inconvenienced because you couldn't go to the St. Patrick's Day parade, or you couldn't go to the local pub and raise a pint on St. Patrick's Day. Or, your gatherings are canceled. We had to do my wife's baby shower on Sunday via Zoom because we couldn't meet. And it was great. It was wonderful. But we missed out on that opportunity. Our baby's due in 3 weeks, and her grandparents aren't going to get to hold her after she's born for several weeks after that. They're not even going to get to see her because we can't take that chance that one of them might be sick. It's just because someone in your family is not affected doesn't mean this isn't affecting real people. And I think there needs to be a little bit more compassion and a little bit more empathy in all of this. All right, I'm climbing down off my soapbox now. It's a beautiful day. I'm going to go outside and rake some leaves, I think, or do something outside so I can be out in the sun. And, hopefully, oh, hello, neighbor just walked by. Hopefully, get some exercise in. But I need us to think about this stuff. I really do. I really need us to think about it. All right, this is looking forward towards better days, and hopefully they'll be here soon. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.